All right, it is the Big Douglas Show, and it is a Victory Monday. That's right. Usually maybe an overreaction Monday. We'll see what the fellas think. I don't think there'll be much overreacting today. There are a lot of good things to like about yesterday. Let's get into the group. Great group we have today. The host of the Al Galdi podcast, Al Galdi, is with us today. Al, what did you think yesterday? Who gets your game ball?
Well, I think we have to start out with our QB1, Commander Carson, and the response to the two picks. I mean, you can talk about like the roller coaster of the game. How about just the roller coaster of the fourth quarter? Have you ever seen a singular quarter in which a quarterback did what Carson did? 2 killer picks and then 2 glorious touchdown passes. That's amazing. That's like an entire game in a period of 15 game minutes. I thought that was remarkable, and it's this kind of thing that like you just don't see often. So his response to the 2 picks was tremendous. What he did with those 2 late touchdown passes to Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, tremendous. But the great thing about the win is that there were a number of heroes. Like it wasn't just the Carson Wentz show. You think about Curtis Samuel and Antonio Gibson and Derek Forrest. I thought Daron Payne had a really good game. There was a lot that didn't go well in the game, but there was a lot to like about the game, and there's a lot to build off of with the game. So it's exciting to see.
It was interesting. I don't know who to give credit for. It was somebody on ESPN wrote it, but essentially it was like, if you want to see all of what Carson Wentz is, he showed it to you. Like, you don't have to wait to see the bad moments. We got those. You have to wait to see the exciting moments. You got those. It looked like maybe he was still – I thought there was some moments when he could have run the ball that he chose not to. And I'm curious how much they're still trying to, like, coach Indianapolis out of him. Like, I wonder how much, they were trying to, like, keep him in a bubble there so that they didn't get bad Carson. But I think you got to allow him to be bad Carson, if you will, to get the really good Carson. Swaggy, it's funny. I thought about you yesterday in the game. When London Fletcher was on with us, they told us a story about right before you were getting ready to start, all excited. And then what did you do? Tear the hamstring practicing before practice?
I tore my quad in a walkthrough practice trying to dunk a basketball the day after I got signed from the practice squad.
And it just made me think yesterday about poor Fedarian Mathis. I mean, did he get 3 snaps before he went down?
Right.
It's got to be brutal to put in the work, get the load that I think he was expecting, get 3 plays. I mean, I'm trying to put into perspective as a player, it's got to be just heartbreaking.
It's definitely tough, especially when you put in the work all year and you're expecting to try and make a Pro Bowl or just be one of the best guys on the team that people can rely on, and for you to get hurt that quick, it's definitely mind-blowing. Like mentally, guys have to like try and get through that injury thing because you have such high expectations for yourself just to play. So not alone, like just trying to recover from the injury is going to be tough, but mentally getting over the fact that you got hurt so quick is really hard for a lot of guys to get over. So we pray that mentally he'll be good and physically he'll be okay with the rehab and the surgery or whatever he has to do to get better.
Doesn't sound very promising. George, you were at the game. George is with us today from full press coverage. Commanders. Did I get that right?
You did. Full press Commanders. Full press coverage, same thing. Yeah, it's all good.
You were there. It sounded electric on the TV broadcast. It looked like mostly burgundy in the stands, which was nice. How was it? How'd you like the vibe of the game?
It was an awesome atmosphere. I truly, have to say that. I went to the Chargers game last year, and Chargers game was definitely, 60, 70% capacity. A lot of Charger fans were actually at that game last year. Granted, the Jaguars don't have a thriving fan base, maybe up in the DC area, but I'd say it's about 90% Commander fans here. I I looked at some stats this morning. They sold 58,000 tickets, about 86% of the capacity of the stadium. And the lower bowl was packed, man. It was so much fun. Everyone was really excited. I think everyone's amped for that new energy, that new era, having a new quarterback, and it's the whole new jerseys and all that. So there's a lot of positivity. And, we all saw in the first half, we're up 14-3. And it appeared to be that we had a nice little, we have a quarterback one for the first time in a long time. So it actually it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. I do have to give credit to the team as well. They actually made a Legends Plaza. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that yet, but it's basically behind section 130. And there's like a little concourse now where they have a stage. They had Doug Williams walking around, Santana Moss, Fred Smoot. They had 675 beers, which was definitely the controversy around the area because they're saying these $18 beers. There were some cheaper beers there as well. So it was nice. It's just a fun vibe, and I think everybody was pumped up for it. But the true test is week 3 against the Eagles. They travel well, and we're going to see how that stadium looks in a couple of weeks.
Al, you brought up the quarterback. If he continues to play at this rate, he'll finish out his contract, and they'll be looking to re-up him. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but the money they'll pay him is fantastic. I mean, the going rate for a quarterback is getting close to 40. He's at 28. You think this is what we'll see most of the season? I mean, the offense was moving. They weren't asking him to do a lot of short passes. I mean, basically, you got a lot of weapons, as they've said all offseason, and they just try to get those guys in space and let them do what they do. And that's exactly what they did yesterday.
Yeah, I liked what I saw out of Carson for the most part. I'm still a little nervous with him because he had so many what the fuck moments. Like, how'd you not make that throw? Like, why did you make that interception? You know what I mean? So, it was great that we pulled it off, but again, we pulled it off against Jacksonville, and it's like, and when you beat Jacksonville, it's like, oh, you're supposed to beat Jacksonville. It's almost like beating the Jets. Like, you're supposed to win those games. You know what I mean? So we'll see how he does against better competition.
Of course, Swaggy, I talked to the beat reporter from Jacksonville, and she said they were saying the same thing down there, right? Like they also were saying, why can't we beat Washington? We expect to beat Washington. Lions fans will be saying the same thing next week. We gotta earn the right to assume we're going to beat teams. Al, it was they were excited to kick dirt all over Antonio Gibson. He needed that game yesterday. Really, he had the game that fans had been hoping that they'd allow him to have since they drafted him. I don't know why it took 3 years to throw him the ball 8 times, yet here we are, and he looked like exactly what they had promised us.
He looked really good, and I give him a lot of credit. I think that he's handled his situation really well. If you go back to last week and some of the things he said, how he didn't handle that fumble in the first preseason game in the best possible way, there's been like a humility with Gibson. He has never come off defensive. He's never come off bitter or anything like that. He seems to genuinely be a good guy, and he seems to have handled his situation well. I mean, let's make it clear. He got demoted, okay? He was the RB1, and that got taken away from him after one preseason game, which leads you to believe that the team was kind of sort of looking to do that, that he fumbles one time in one preseason game. And I know he fumbled a lot last year, but it's like as soon as he has inkling of trouble in the preseason, that's it. He's out as the RB1. So, if he was bitter, you could kind of understand that. He doesn't seem to be. And, life and football have a weird way of playing out. You have this Brian Robinson Jr. situation. Who knows what'll happen when Brian comes back? But for now, Gibson is the RB1. Like that was something that was notable about Sunday. Jonathan Williams barely played. So this idea that like Williams might get a bunch of carries, like no, Gibson was the RB1. Now the Commanders didn't run the ball a lot, which actually I kind of liked, but Gibson was impactful as a ball carrier, as a pass catcher, to your point. It's been a strange deal why he hasn't been more impactful as a pass catcher over his first 2 NFL seasons. I know that J.D. McKissick's presence had something to do with that, but I also don't think that Gibson, up until yesterday anyway, had done a lot as a pass catcher, save for that great catch he had in the Buffalo game last year. So he can certainly do it. We saw him do it. And, the thing about him, too, is like he's not just a pass-catching running back. Like you can deploy him. You can line him up on the outside. You can line him up in the slot. Like he really is an all-purpose weapon. In Gibson, in Curtis Samuel, you have true, legitimate, and J.D. McKissick, true, legitimate, all-purpose offensive weapons. And the team hasn't had many guys like that over the years.
Not a whole lot of action from McKissick yesterday. Were you surprised by that? Al?
Not a whole lot of what?
Not a whole lot of work for McKissick yesterday. I personally was a little surprised by that. I'm looking at it now. It's 3 carries and 3 receptions.
Yeah, I think probably because things are going well with Gibson. They didn't run the ball a lot, so the only way that McKissick was going to get the ball was via the pass. I think he had a few carries, but not many. And I mean, you saw Curtis Samuel get fed. You saw Jahan Dodson get fed. You saw Logan Thomas get fed. Yeah, I know it's cliche to talk about like there's only one football to go around, but there are a lot of weapons. I mean, if you look at the playing time on Sunday, the bottom 3 receivers barely played. Cam Sims barely played. De'Ami Brown barely played. Dax Milne barely played. Like, it's going to be tough. If everyone's healthy, if you're not one of the top 2 or 3 guys, it's going to be tough to get touches this year because there are a lot of weapons at the disposal of Scott Turner and Carson Wentz. But yeah, I think the other thing too is that I think every game can be different. So maybe week 1 wasn't a J.D. McKissick game. Maybe week 2 ends up being a J.D. McKissick game. We don't have a lot from Antonio Gibson. I think it's going to be matchup and opponent dependent.
George, they still didn't do a great job of getting off on 3rd down. I know they obviously don't think linebacker is a need, but to me, the linebackers didn't look great yesterday. I mean, Holcomb was not really what I expected him to be yesterday, and Jamin Davis, I guess at this point, is what I expected him to be, which was not great. They used a lot of nickel and safety, and I think we're going to see a whole lot of that through the year. And that's fine. I've said this repeatedly now. It feels to me like this is the way football and defense is heading anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You need one really good middle linebacker and lots of safeties. St. Juice was out there a bunch. I thought he played well. I'm not sure where to be on with St. Juice. I'm not sure about you, George.
Mm-hmm.
But the back end played much better yesterday than I expected.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the strength of anything, obviously the defensive line is the kind of what gets all the accord across the across the league. But I do like Bobby McCain. I think Bobby McCain is pretty serviceable. He's pretty, he won't make that many mistakes. He might not make a lot of highlight plays, but he suffice. He does what he needs to do. I thought Derek Forrest played out of his mind yesterday, but I think it's a pretty cool pretty interesting problem to have when Cam Curl comes back. I believe he probably will come back this week. So it's going to be interesting how they implement them both, because Derek Forrest was definitely a coverage, had several breakups. He had that game-winning interception at the end of the game. So I am impressed by that. I agree with you. The linebackers were a little bit suspect. Jamin Davis was always a little step behind in his coverage, but I thought that he was in the mix. I guess I'm always trying to look at a glass half full. He actually had a sack that was taken back because of a penalty, so he was generating pressure and he blitzed them on the play right there. So I do see the potential with him. Hopefully he'll continue to get better, but I do think our linebacking core is going to be something to keep an eye on all year long, because Evan Engram's kind of known for having drops, and I think he provided some yesterday as well. And then my last point is Christian Kirk. I mean, I love Kendall Fuller, and Kendall Fuller gets a lot of kudos around our area, but I view him more as like a solid B corner. I don't think he's a complete shutdown corner, and Christian Kirk got some pretty big plays yesterday, so we'll see how that kind of plays out all year.
Chris, it felt like that D-line was in full effect yesterday. And in fact, the 2 penalties, what was that, late in the second quarter, Montez Sweat was in there. And I think they took a sack back and maybe a pressure. It felt like yesterday was a game where Montez showed you really what he was about. I know the 2 tackles are the ones that got the sack, but Montez looked every bit what they expected when they drafted him in the first round yesterday. What do you think about that D-line yesterday in the effort, Swag?
Yeah, I loved how our D-line looked. We was getting bad at balls. We was pushing the pocket. The guys on the edge was rushing great off the edge and making a quarterback have to step up into our D tackles so they could get those type of sacks. And that's kind of what I was alluding to last year, where it just seems like it was so many times when all the defensive line wasn't on the same page. But yesterday we all looked like we were on the same page. If Sweat was coming around the edge and he was forcing that quarterback to step up, that defensive tackle was in his rush lane to stop the quarterback from allowing him to be able to step up and be comfortable within the pocket. Payne, Allen, What's 92 name?
That's the
Hill? Yeah, I'm trying to think of number.
Is that Roti?
Yeah, so they
Somebody-
all look great. They all look great
Yeah.
yesterday. We had a really good rotation. Even when our numbers got down, when we only had about 2 or 3 defensive tackles left, the defensive line still played great. They created pressure all day. The quarterback was never comfortable. Even when we didn't get sacks, we was able to, push the quarterback, force him to throw it like a second and a half earlier, because there was a couple of times when he had great opportunities to make big time plays downfield, but he didn't have the opportunity to step up into his throw, or he got grabbed on his shoulder right before he made the throw that put the throw off, so that it was an incompletion when they were wide open guys, So our defensive line did what we're supposed to do, and that was to make the quarterback as uncomfortable as possible. And I felt like yesterday, Jacksonville's quarterback never was comfortable. He was always in the back of his eye, where's the pressure coming from? Who's about to come through on his defensive line? He can never just sit back there comfortably and dissect our defense.
The two rosters are kind of built similarly that way, Al. And the one thing that probably won't get talked about enough, and it's just the nature of the business, that Jacksonville Jaguars D-line and defense as a whole is really quite good. They've got first rounders all over the place. And from a pressure standpoint, the offensive line was really good yesterday.
Yeah, they held up.
You figure Schweitzer goes out. Al, I think that unit is coming along nicely.
Yeah. I liked how we looked. We was able to run the ball. We was able to protect the quarterback for the most part. And, Jacksonville always have top 10 picks, so they better be good on defense.
What'd you think, Al, about the effort from the O-line?
Yeah, I thought the offensive line, for the most part, did a good job. I thought it was interesting that you had 3 of the 5 starting offensive linemen play the entire game: Chase Roulier, Charles Leno Jr., and Samuel Cosmi. But you had a lot happening at the guard spots. Wes Schweitzer started over Trey Turner at right guard. That was interesting, and that was not something that I think a lot of people were anticipating, even with Trey having missed so much time with the quadriceps ailment. But then Wes, during the game, has this left hamstring issue, and so Trey ended up playing more than Wes did in the game. Andrew Norwell also came out for a few snaps in the game, and so we saw some of Sadiq Charles in the game. And it's not clear exactly what was happening, but Ron Rivera, during his post-game press conference, talked about them purposely rotating the guards in the game. And I can't remember ever hearing that or seeing that, where a team intentionally over the course of the game is rotating a spot or multiple spots on the offensive line. So it's a little tricky. We don't know how much of this was injury induced versus how much of this was intentional. Wes clearly started, and Wes was dealing with a hamstring ailment. We do know that. But then we saw a lot of Trey Turner the rest of the game. Norwell came out for a few snaps. So I'm interested to find out more about that, if maybe this is like a new thing that the team is trying. I mean, when it comes to their offensive line, they can do what they want, because I think this guy, John Matsko, is tremendous. He's like this offensive line sage. And I think he's the best offensive line coach the team has had since the great Joe Bugle. But I thought that was kind of a different thing, where you see over the course of the game multiple guys playing at various spots. That's obviously not something we're used to.
Swaggy, I want to ask you, after Al said that about Matsko, and I totally believe it. They fired Sam Mills in an odd time. Coaches don't usually get let go at that part. And Ron says, we just weren't getting out of him what we needed for those guys. How important is the position coach there? And what do you think they probably were concerned about and looking for when they made that change? Particularly
your
since the
position
defensive line, I guess, is so young.
Your position coach is pretty much the key to your success. Like, he's always in charge of the techniques that the coaches want to see. He's in charge of teaching you the scheme that you're supposed to run, and how the coaches want it to look when you do it. So having that position coach be a good position coach is really vital to the success of the players, not only the vets, but even the young guys. Because the young guys have so much to learn when you come into the league. Of just, everyone's athletic, everyone knows how to play football, but there's certain techniques that you need to understand to be better. Certain ways you have to look at the defense or look at the offense. There's certain ways you need to watch film. And that position coach is there to teach you all of those little nuances to become a great player. And it's up to that position coach to really push you and make you great, push you in practice, demanding greatness out of you and pulling that out of you. And if you have an offensive line coach or a defensive line coach that's not getting that job done, then you have to get rid of them, because the life expectancy of an NFL player is not that long, so you have to get the best out of the players quickly. And they just didn't see what they needed to see out of the coach, so they moved on. But we made a great decision because both of our lines looked really good last night, and you could tell that the coaching has gotten better, and especially like on the defensive line. I know we fired our defensive line coach, and we got a new coach. I mean, our defensive line looks so much better. Like, they finally looked like they were on the same page. It was a key to our offensive line coach, the position coach, to be able to rotate guys in and not fall off. A lot of times when you have a sub, the defense is licking their chops like, oh my God, we got the backup and it's time to kick his ass. But when that backup came in, he played his ass off, both backups. And I was definitely concerned about the rotation of guards, but especially with a guy of the caliber of Trey Turner, he was a Pro Bowl guard. I remember playing against him a few times, and he was always a tough matchup because he was so aggressive, So hopefully he gets back to the old Trey where he's not rotating in and out, and he plays at a high level. But the defensive and the offensive line looked great no matter who was in the game. So as long as we're winning and as long as the guys are coming in and out and they're playing well, who cares if they're rotating?
George, it's a bit of a love fest today, and that's well deserved. But do you have something that you saw that concerns you moving forward that you think they'd like to clean up?
So obviously, well, first of all, before we turn into that point, I do want to give props to the defensive line as well. I thought Daron Payne played his butt off yesterday. He had 3 QB hits. He had a sack and a swat ball. Montez Sweat was definitely pretty active too. So I do have to give kudos to our defensive line coach there. In regard to just cleaning things up, obviously turnovers, right? That goes across the board. You and I talked offline, Doug. Curtis Samuel was driving down the field. We were, I think it was, the Jaguars are starting to kind of catch up a little bit. I think it was 14-12 at that point. We were driving down the field, and Curtis Samuel fumbles the ball, and they get the ball, and they turn around and score. So turnovers are definitely a big one. Obviously Carson Wentz still on those turnovers as well with those 2 interceptions. That the first one was, I watched the game again last night. The first throw to Jahan Dotson on the interception, it was a little bit, delayed. It was a tick late, and basically the cornerback jumped in and kind of closed on that. The second one was an exceptional play by Trayvon Walker, man. He had a sack and an interception in his first rookie game. He was getting, I think Charles Leno was blocking him. He kind of jumped off and got an interception off the screen. Obviously we have to avoid those. But I think ultimately Carson Wentz has the skills to take us to the next level. And then finally, our run defense, I was kind of surprised by that. We did generate pressure in regard to the quarterback, but they were kind of getting some runs on us, some pretty big runs as well. Let me look at the stats real quick. James Robinson averaged 6 yards per carry. He had 11 carries for 66 yards. And then Travis Etienne he averaged 12 yards per carry. So I don't know why the Jaguars kind of went to the passing game often, but they were running on us. Just something to keep an eye on moving forward, especially with the Eagles and Lions coming up. They have 2 good running backs, a whole bunch of running backs.
And the Lions are definitely going to run that route all day long.
Yeah, Jamal Williams had a touchdown, and DeAndre Swift was all over it.
Team. I got Jamal on my fantasy team, so
so you know.
They got weapons on that Lions team.
They do, man. Yeah, they're up and coming.
Yeah, they're definitely a solid team, man. Just because you hate to see the other teams winning in the division, I was so happy early in the game. I was like, Detroit about to whip Philly ass, and then next thing you know, I turned back to the game. It was like a tie game, and then Philly was up by 17. I was like, what the hell happened? Oh my God, Detroit.
Detroit. It was a wild Sunday for the division.
It was.
That Giants team is a little better than I think people give them credit for.
100%. And it's funny, the Cowboys look the worst out of the group, right? The Cowboys look the worst out of all of them.
The Cowboys look terrible, and I was able to talk shit to all of my Dallas fans last night. Oh, it was so amazing because they come in here with all this Super Bowl this, Super Bowl that. This is our year, and they scored 3 freaking points in their first game of the season. Now Dak is out for I don't know how long. They might be the.
That sounds like at least 4 weeks.
It said 6 to 8 weeks. I heard this morning. Yeah.
And the backup quarterback is not any better than the backup quarterback was 2 years ago. You'd have thought they
Trash
at least
bags.
learned the lesson and solidified the backup spot. That is wild to me. I'm curious the same question.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
They can't go get Jimmy Garoppolo because, as I've been telling people
Too expensive.
forever, 49ers can't afford to let him go because I'm not sure Trey Lance is it, and I haven't been. And I don't think they are, or else they'd have moved him by now.
It was a rainy game, so it's kind of hard to judge a quarterback on rainy games the way it rained in the San Francisco game. But I do feel once Lance gets comfortable in that offense, he'll have kind of like that RG3 effect. Because when you have a mobile quarterback in Kyle Shanahan's offense, it's really hard to stop, especially if we got the run game going. They have a solid offensive line led by Trent Williams. Once that running game gets going and he can really use that play action and get guys open downfield, I think he'll have that RG3 first-year effect once he gets comfortable. So we'll see.
It's funny with all the change this last offseason, I was worried that it was going to not feel like a Washington game, if that makes sense. But I didn't feel that way. Like it could have been easy for it to really have an expansion team vibe because, frankly, it's about as close to getting an expansion team as you can. But I thought the uniform looked well. My wife likes the fact that they wore the white socks and broke up the pants a little bit. But you could tell they're trying, and I thought it went pretty well. Al, I'll ask you this before we finish up. Same thing I asked George. What is it that you're looking to clean up if you're the Commanders heading into week 2 versus the Lions? Al?
Well, I think you definitely want to see a cleaner game. You know, it was great that the Commanders won on Sunday, but I mean, you think about it, the Commanders won despite losing the turnover battle 3-1. We know that the turnover battle is like one of the most determining things for outcomes in NFL games. You don't want to make it a habit of getting tripled up in the turnover department week in, week out and trying to win that way. So definitely got to be better in that regard. I think in issue 2 with the secondary on Sunday, way too many penalties on the secondary. You saw a lot of flags being called on Commanders defensive backs. So you want to get that cleaned up. I was a little surprised at how much of a difficult time the Commanders had at stopping the run. That was actually something that Washington did very well defensively last season, was stop the run. It's funny. Last year, Washington was good against the run, bad against the pass. On Sunday against the Jags, Washington was actually decent against the pass, but bad against the run. So, you know, go figure on something like that. But look, every NFL team is in this spot. Like one game into the season, you're not going to be like this totally well-oiled machine. You're going to have things that you need to clean up. You're going to have, you know, rough edges that you got to smooth out. And I think for me as a Commanders fan, and I know all you guys are fans of the team as well, it's like we saw a lot of good on Sunday against Jacksonville. And the fact that it wasn't a perfect performance is okay. Like it's week 1, you know, you're an evolving entity as an NFL team. And the fact that you may have a big play passing offense, the fact that, you know, you can take a guy who was a 5th-round pick last year in Derek Forrest, and in week 1 of his 2nd season, he's good to play and play well as he did in a spot start like that. I think that speaks well for not just like the now, but kind of the overall culture here, that things are moving in the right direction. So I'm excited. And, you know, we know that Washington traditionally does not get off to good starts in seasons. I mean, this is only the 3rd week 1 win for this team over the last 9 seasons. So to be 1-0, I mean, I don't take that for granted at all. And the prospect of being 2-0, I mean, how great would that be? That is not something that this team has done with any kind of frequency in recent years.
And the game from Sunday was kind of a nod to the front office too. A lot of picks that they made last year. William Jackson III wasn't great last year. They didn't get Curtis Samuel at all last year. They didn't get Fitzpatrick at all last year. Now, Fitzpatrick obviously is gone, but the 2 guys that you still got did everything that you hoped that they would do when you got them last year and were so excited about it. So, I mean, I will still say I understand the defense was a bit of a letdown last year, but all 3 of those guys were added. They didn't ever get Fitzpatrick. To me, they upgraded at the quarterback position, and somehow people were lower on them this year than they were last year. I really liked what they did yesterday. I thought the offense was creative in a way that it hadn't been in a while. Galdi, I know that you love that they throw the ball on first down willingly and willing to back it up with a second down throw if the first down throw doesn't work.
Love it.
Nothing worse than a long second down run. Nothing. So I think there was, sometimes you get these wins and you're like, yeah, that was great. But yesterday was a win that felt like things were moving in the right direction. And I think we can. Go ahead, George.
And just to jump on that, we have to give the front office a little bit of credit for Jahan Dotson, right? They definitely traded back. I know Chris Olave was kind of that hot pick, or Jameson Williams was that hot pick, but moving back 5 slots, getting Jahan Dotson, getting 2 touchdowns in his first game. He's hit the ground running over training camp. Well, we actually, in addition to that, picked up Brian Robinson and Sam Howell. So we'll see if they actually have more effects in the long run. And then finally, I thought it was pretty interesting while rewatching the game. The team is the 7th youngest in the entire league. I didn't know that till hearing that on the Fox broadcast. So the fact that we are a young building team, I think Carson Wentz and Charles Leonard are the 2 seniors on the team, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's kind of nice that we are kind of building a team from the ground up. So in Ron's image,
George, they probably went from like 3rd youngest to 7th youngest when they signed John Bostic.
Exactly. Poor John. We get on John so much. I feel bad for him. But go ahead, yeah.
Well, fellas, it was a great Sunday. This was a great episode. You can catch all George Carmi's work at Full Press Coverage Commanders. Al's got the Al Galdi podcast every day before 5, before 6. Al, in the morning.
Yes, sir. Right
early, right?
Weekday morning, absolutely.
And of course, you can catch Swaggy right here with me every Monday. Fellas, thanks for hopping on with me today. This was great.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much.
See you guys.
All right, bye, guys.